Hello and welcome to WoodWing's webinar on how to implement Omni strategy in real life. I'm very happy that we have our guest speaker present today, Lars Krollecke from Alamedia. While some people are still dialing in, I would like to make you aware of some housekeeping rules. All attendees other than the speakers are muted. Per default, you can post questions during the sessions while using the GoToWebinar panel that should be displayed per default on the right-hand side. We will look into all kinds of questions that are coming in during the sessions. We agreed with Lars that we can raise some questions during the session, but at the end of the session, we will also have some time to answer the questions. And after the session, you will receive the recording of that webinar within the next 24 hours. My name is Philip Hendricks. I am the technical host for today's session. And why is this not working? I have some issues with my mouse at the moment. I want to press anything, but let's maybe do this first. Yep. Can happen in a live session. My name is Philip Hendricks. I'm the technical host for this session, and at WoodWing, I'm the product marketing manager. The speakers for today's webinar is Martin Reinders. He's my boss. He's the CCO at WoodWing, responsible for sales and marketing. And as mentioned, I'm very happy to welcome Lars Krollecke, digital director for digital transformation at Alamedia. And before Lars is going to present how to implement Omni strategy in real life, I would like to give the mic to Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. And good morning to everyone dialing in from Europe or the time zones related to the European part of the world. Also, good evening for those of you dialing in from Asia. And very happy to welcome you here on this last webinar that we are hosting as WoodWing before everyone will enjoy a nice holiday break. Philip mentioned already, today we'll hear from Lars from Alamedia, one of the leading publishing groups for the Nordics, on how to implement Omni strategy in real life. And I realized that perhaps some of you were at the webinar that we hosted a few weeks back on November 19th, where Swedish consulting firm Capero already gave some insights into our very interesting transformation journey. And for those of you that were not able to attend and want to hear more about some other aspects of this transformation project, I would highly recommend to look at the recording that I think, Philip, we can also share as part of the recording for today's session, because it focuses a lot about the desire and the need as it was felt by senior management within the Alamedia group to seek for efficiency, and that is good, and that is probably what's needed, and they wanted to do so without compromising quality. But even if that's need then turns out to be a mandate, hey, we want to do something, and it was also mentioned that before there were some things happening and some efficiency here and some efficiency there, but they were really looking for more breakthrough, real change that drove real efficiency. Then that is again great to have such a mandate. Hey, and Lars was one of the people, I guess, who was commissioned to say, go figure, make it work. But that's still then very tricky, because I think you all will recognize there is a lot of times there is a need or a feeling that, oh yeah, we could potentially do better here, or there's this is an area where we believe that by doing some things differently, or maybe we should implement this too, and that will help to drive us another a few percent efficiency. But that's more based out of a need or some assumptions. But actually on a project of the likes that Ella did in the last years, you basically are looking more not for assumptions or thoughts. You'd like to back it up with true data and with facts. And I think that's also very important, because this project was of such a size that it required the whole company to also really believe in this, because people had to change the way they were working. And if you do that, yeah, because the boss says so, it might work, but it's much better if people get confronted with data that's actually showing, hey, you know what, we really have to change, because look, here and here is a factual data that this is not how we can continue to do things. And that's exactly what happened in this project, where there was a lot of in-depth research, which really went through a lot of detail. And Lars has some slides, Lars, right, that are showing that are hard to read, and we explicitly, and Lars explicitly put them in there. And I think that's really good, because it shows to what length and level of detail they went in this project. And that for me is one of the things that I found very interesting of this case, and why I'm very pleased that Lars was able to share this. I think it's also interesting, Lars, we're both from a small country in Europe, right? We are just a speck on the ocean, and but at the same time we're also relatively open. So what I also really appreciate is that you are able to share some of this data, because I think we still in this we're publishers, and yes, we are sometimes operating in different countries, but we're also sort of competitors. But I think it can really help, and I hope it does, to insights like, okay, we're not the only ones that are having such challenges, and you believe in very much, I get the impression, in the power of sharing and making and giving each other's insights, because at the end of the day, it's really about we want companies such as Alamedia and other publishing companies that are providing really good quality content to survive in this digital age, and where it becomes harder to make money. And that's why I'm very happy as well, Lars, that you're able to share this. So I would suggest, Philip, that you stop sharing, and that you hand over to Lars. So I think, Lars, you can share. And looking forward to hear from you, Lars. Great, we can see your slide. And as Philip mentioned, just final thing, if you have questions, please do raise them in the chat window. We want to see if we can make this a bit of an interactive webinar instead of just Lars talking, even though that's good as well. So if you have interesting questions, I agreed with Lars, I could interrupt him and ask him to elaborate a little bit where needed. So with that, I hand over to you, Lars. I'm looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you very much, man. Hello, everyone. I hope can I get the confirmation to see my slide deck? It's okay?
Yes, Lars, we can.
And the sound is good. Great, thank you. Yeah, my name is Lars. I'm a director of digital transformation. I was in some way in-house project manager of this transformation project of the Omni strategy in real life. I will go through different themes here. First, a little bit about Alamedia, then actually the describing of the project charter, then a little to the main content, but also the potential. A little bit about the digital content, the landscape, the analysis of what we actually look into. That's what Martin just mentioned. There's a lot of data here. I think it's quite important to understand how we did this. A little bit about the future content production, a little about the organization, and also a little back to actually, because also this is hosted by WoodWing, which technology we're actually using also to, because we also have to step up tech-wise. So let's jump into it. So a little bit about Alamedia here. This is the old friends that actually created Alamedia, and if you look into the timeline here, we started Alamedia, founded by Carl and Laura, that you just saw the picture. It's actually for 1873. So we have quite a long legacy here. Again, the first magazine was actually produced and published and distributed in 1874. In 1894, we started in Sweden. We also did that in Norway in '97, and we actually bought some stuff in, so we actually got Finland on board also in '92. And just to understand, this is WoodWing. Point zero of WoodWing was 2016. We have different locations. We have in Denmark, Copenhagen, Finland, Helsinki, Norway, Oslo, and in Sweden we have Malmö and Stockholm. One of the biggest, like say, challenge for us still is our main business is still weeklies. I'm sure if you're a publisher, we will still want to convert to the digital universe, but still the main revenue is still coming from that. The activities like also we have newspaper in Norway, we have weeklies, magazine, including ad, quite normally. We have multiple digital services, food portal, apps, whatever, brand sites for the different brands. We also have a huge like travel group, quite under pressure right now. You can understand that. We also have a lot of the content marketing agencies scattered around in Nordic countries, about 10. And we also have our own printing plant. So, but let's go into the actual project. So, what we did here, and also was mentioned, Martin, we actually have Capiro, as some of you maybe heard like last month, actually supporting this process, and it was quite important, and we'll come back to that. But in this process, we try really to look into how we work in the process within our weeklies and magazines in general on all channels. The idea was also to analyze, identify like which problem we had. We know we could do better, but how should we actually attack that? And some of this was actually supported by Capiro to do it in a structured way to find the best way to deep dive into our own business. One thing was really also to streamline, like lean everything we did. That's like in both like production wise, but also organization and the whole, let's say, share between like freelancers, interns, all that game was very important to also look into. And I think one of the most important things in this project was actually that we got Capiro to interview our employees. And as you see here, uncover hidden factories. One of the issues when a manager, top manager, middle manager, whatever, ask questions about process and so on is sometimes like domestic political issues that will not be like embraced very much and not very like detailed. When we actually get Capiro to do the interviews, it's more like people really talking. They will get everything out, and that was the whole idea here. And the last thing that the project was actually reboot the whole publisher unit in Alamedia, Denmark, to actually find a new way of working, a new baseline for working, so we can invent and innovate new products built on a very steady platform. So what we did, as a lot of interviews, and now we'll have different main problems, so 2 slides of main problems, just to what we look into, just to understand the scenario. Like one of the editor work bit by bit. Journalists do not work across like the whole. Sure, also because of the legacy we started from many years ago, but there's a lot of very brand-wise, very much siloed. And we try to look into that. The low proportion of freelancers, quality, creative, efficiency, and flexibility, and that's also, I'm sure, something about costs. So that, let's say, a balance between that, we also look into that. In principle, the artist is never written for more titles. That's more like the reuse or more pre-planning, that we actually create one story for multiple channels or multiple brands. And especially also about the low reuse, and also the concept that was very heavy to actually reuse. Therefore, sometimes it's actually bought stuff in instead of actually reusing. And again, also the other thing was that, let's say some of we actually look into our colleagues, or what do you call it, colleagues in the business, that how can they be that they actually have less content compared to ourselves. So that's also about like why we're doing that. Again, as I said, very much siloed between print and digital, but like 2 different worlds. And actually no very like a straight KPIs target on reuse, meaning that we really not like focus on what to deliver, which KPI to actually produce the best one. And again, unplanned reuse, meaning that reuse will very much pop up, and then we have to search, and we sure have Elvis from WoodWing, but still, when you have to do like on demand instead of have thought about that in the earlier stage, it will always be a little bit like difficult. again, also the custom magazine created instead of saving someone else, that the whole like call it like positive, also negative hidden factor, how is actually the financial economic flowing between departments and brands and so on. So how was that actually showed? So, and again, little collaboration, again, back to the silo issue, that we have the idea, and also we also got that in an interviews, that magazine and weeklies was actually two different islands. So editorial hubs got resource expertise from one place, but work too little across. Again, we have some on that time. We have, I think, was one editorial hub producing food for more than one brand, but it was actually not like put out to a broader perspective. But I will get back to that later. And really also very much about the unclear mandate between editorial hub, editor-in-chief brands and different brands, meaning who's actually have the mandate to decide what should be in the magazine, which page should be used, and so on. And unplanned reuse gives double work. Planned reuse must be done from the beginning. That was some of the feedback, also one of the we tried to aim for. All editors have different ways of planning, making it difficult to create synergies. Again, everything was like, again, back to the silos. Some have some spreadsheets, some have other tools, and someone just did it like on demand. So it's really something to look into. And the freelancer purchase based on traditional relationship, more like as is. We have always done that for 10 years using this freelancer, so it could be good, but what about the actual pricing and so on? So it's a lot of things to deep dive into. So the potential for this project was actually to reduce the content production. I'll come back to the data supporting that. But also reduce the volume of certain titles, comparing to, like we talked about it, also the actual balance between, let's say, the volume of the ads pages, but also for the content of the editorial pages. So we have a nice balance there, but also compared to the competitors. Increased reusing and planning of content across entire publishing units, more like really umbrella. So we actually plan cleverly on print and digital seen in a bigger perspective. Less but better digital material. All this, the potential, I come back with data that actually supporting this journey. And reducing purchase costs, meaning that, again, freelancers so on, we have to take that game also, so we can be better to reduce the cost of what you actually get. And again, more editorial hubs with a broader responsibility, a racial mandate, again, a new way of working. How can the editorial hubs with all the specialist journalists within a given category was very interesting to get that up running also. And again, freelancer-based permanent employees, few editorial executive levels actually reduce the pyramid of how we work and actually got more like a flat structure. And again, also using the power, because I'm representing here Ala Denmark, and so also better Nordic collaboration, or can reuse, like if something was produced before, let's in Norway, let's try, can we use that in Denmark, and likewise. So what we did was actually go into Willy supporting one thing where Capio supports that, but the funny thing, I don't know if this is funny, it's actually quite not awful, but it's a good point here that all this data I'm going to present you was data we have in the house, but we have never built the bridges between the different data, and therefore we didn't actually look into that. I think that's really the learning here. It's almost like a private budget. We have to be sure that everything is in some way balanced. We have the clear picture, and we did that in the whole data and analyze. And this is important. I will come a lot of like graphs, but also spreadsheets you see here. I will try to explain. We don't have to deep dive into the figures because a lot of figures, but I think the importance here, I will try to highlight what the learning was here. So let's come into that. So a little bit about page views per month, like that's on digital. Let's look into this. So this is just like checking out. This is no like attached to any brand. This is more like the look of, for example, a weekly, monthly, every month when they post something on the websites. So in this example here, we get to do 392 posts. And if you come back to the potential also, that we have the idea that do we actually post too little or post too much? We didn't have that clear picture. So we did this analyze here. And I don't say the surprise, maybe you're a little bit surprised, it was that the best 50%, like 196 of those posts, actually have 82% of the share of the traffic on this weekly number 2. And you can see down there, so in some way in this data we found out we actually, let's say, oversampling or overproducing post and content digital comparing to what they actually, how much they actually the traffic, like just the 50%. So in that sense, we see some potential doing that. If we see a little bit other way here, that we have those like new articles, what we also find out, like looking into all our system, GA360, whatever we have, all those digital efforts we have, was that the visits in average for those like articles, like 4.6 for week 2 and monthly 1.8. So it's quite, again, very, if we look to the next step, that so many new articles and so many created for that in average. And this is quite a lot of articles doing comparing to how much is actually read. And that was a little bit like, I think it's quite a surprise, and we come back to the financial later. But again, the whole idea of that was really a change, I think a game changer for Denmark. I think also some of the Nordic countries that also have been in likewise processes. That idea, we just, the more we post, the more money we earn, and the better we are. And no, we aren't. And that was really one of the clear picture of this data process. So number article read per unique user was like those very small numbers comparing to actually the amount of content and posts we actually produced. So that was one of the, let's say, one of the findings. And then we did like a digital cost benefit. Don't think about the numbers. There's a little bit virtual numbers. It's not like attached to any brand. It's more like a calculation. But if you look on this, we have the number of articles. We have the digital revenue, and we also have the view per month, and also the income. And this is like programmatic. It could be native, whatever. All the stuff we actually earn money on the digital on the websites. So we look into that, and the funny thing was that when we do this and like try to in some way open a little bit, we also find out that the share of the traffic again on week 1 and week 2 was at 56 and 57%. And what we did very much here, and that's, I think that was really important, because as you can see here on the top, we also have like yearly income and new articles, but also the digital FTEs, like the resource actually used to produce this. And that will also give some costs of doing that. But the very interesting thing here is that we actually trying to, as you can see here, I don't know when you talk about FTEs, I don't know how we have like on that universe number 1, we have a 4.2 FTEs. I don't know how the 0.2 FTE looks like. But the more the understanding, we really deep dive into resources. Actually, this is like a spreadsheet. This is a gamification and calculation of this. But it's really important to have that. I really have a view of how much resources we actually use to produce this. And that was really very interesting to deep dive into, and also gave the, let's say, the benefits or the understanding of what to do next. So if we look into this and we have the costs, this was while crazy finding. So because of all the articles we actually push out on the income we have, and that's, remember all the states you see here is like freeze for given time. We are now much more in green. But the result was that every time, for example, on Universe 1, we post an article, it cost around, let's say, 110 euro minus. So that was really a crazy finding, that we didn't, in some way, we just push a lot of posts, we did a lot of stuff there, and really try to think we would do our best, but the figures told that actually this was not like the right way to do it. And that was really maybe not a surprise when we actually start to move forward in projects, but actually get it out like this. And I know this is like a mathematic also about the resources and so on. But one thing is important, this is like not just a trend, this is really how it was. And this is very something, again, like the learning before, the number of posts. but also the result here on the financial, looking on the whole digital cost benefit analysis. That's we actually did not earn money when doing this, and that was also very important in this detail to understand that.
So Lars, it's divided by it's multiplied by 7 to get to euros or something. What is it?
Yeah, it's like what do you call it? Like €1 7.5 Danish crowns, right? So it's like around, if you take the 875 around 100, 110 euros or something like that, right? So.
And was this shared then widely? And were the people from monthly one cheering, hey, we're doing good, and you guys are doing bad?
It was like, first of all, it's a part of the project, but in a later phase, it should be like quite open. This is what we did, and both senior management, sure, but also middle manager, because it's very important. This project also, I come a little bit back to that in a later phase here, is about the whole, when we actually did this and have the gamification of how much content to create, all the editors and supporting editors was actually in that setup, so they actually also put their hand on the plate in some way to this is how we're going to do in the future. But I think again, the most important thing here is all this data was actually the bridge of doing something new, and that's why we need to have this to have a baseline for discussion, and that was actually all this data actually build a platform for the new start or the rebirth of how we should think the future. So this was on the digital part. And the next part I would talk about is actually, because it's also about reuse, about actually the content mix we have at that certain time. So again, we'll look into, if you see on the top here, we have different categories. So we have like reportage, gossip, food, interior, fashion, royal. And what is like a little bit, I hope you can see there's a little bit more red here. And that was like the total number of pages you have on the right side. But also you see here how many pages there is in the different categories. And that what we will look into here, because we have to have an understanding how much do we actually reuse across, meaning across categories, but also across brands. So we did this, and we actually marked everything up, and which will have been really a fantastic tool moving forward also, because we can use this, it's matrix to design and do new efforts moving forward. So what we see here is, we check on the right side now, a little reddish, is that you have the branch on the left, but you have the reuse today. And I have to say, this was back in April last year. So this was like the picture of what we have done, also legacy-wise, look into that. So we saw like on weekly number 1, now only, I say win, and 4% reuse, weekly 2, 11, and we looked to weekly 5 was 18, and weekly 7 was like 100. So there's a different brand types, and you can see the magazines also we call monthly, but that's magazine. It could be the frequency could be 12 issues per year. It could also be 10, 8, a little bit different. But whatever, we still have that, and we can see if we can reuse, especially if I go back here, this area, because that's like the most of the pages we have. So in reuse in this area for those monthly and those weeklies, highlighted in red here, will give the biggest benefit of reuse. Also we see on the cost side. So again, we have reuse today, but we also look into the reuse by category. So we have down at the bottom, we'll look into how it's like the articles, reportage. We have gossip, food, interior again, but now it's into the actually specialized category. A little bit like thinking out to the editorial hubs in some way, because we know food was a hub. They have a reuse on 31%. That was quite good, because they actually already in some way distributed content for different brands. But you can see there's quite a lot of different things. Gardening, green and gardening was quite okay. So there are also different topics or different areas here, but we can see there was a potential. But also we have to find out, again, we need to have this picture actually to move forward. So those spreads you saw before, first like the number of posts, then the digital, how much do we actually get out of that, and now also the editorial, the journalist part, the content there. And what we also saw was that price-wise, there's huge difference again to how much a page costs to produce. And that was very interesting to look into that, because again, this is a little bit back to we showed to the digital effort before. Here's also talking about how many FTEs, resources do we need to actually produce that type of content and pages and so on. So that was really a little bit eye-opener also. Some of the we have a TV magazine, for example, that's just almost like produced with no resources at all, so that price will be low. But looking to the other things, some weeklies and so on, and some are monthly, it's quite big gap between. And if you can use this content mix and actually reuse in a much clever way or better way, maybe you can actually get that price down, actually the cost of viewing that. So this was another learning. So what do we do now is actually I can call it the magic, because it's I hope when I try to go through this was actually the let's say the game we did around all the brands we have in-house. And this is a little bit built on the findings we have. We talk about digital posts, we talk about print pages and stuff like that. So all the findings we have, we could see there was a potential to actually optimize or lean this process of doing maybe less volume, maybe reuse better, maybe also reuse like omni-wise, using like a post or article is not just for a given destination. An article is actually to multi-channel publishing, meaning that omni way of working. So all this we did for all the brands, and all the managers was actually in that project. First of all, the chief editors in some way, or the supporting chief editors for those brands. So we actually did this in workshops on the wall. And if some of you was in the Capero process last month, maybe you saw, I remember I saw one of the backgrounds is actually where you do this on a piece of paper on the wall. This is just like, I call it future content gamification. This is just like a designed numbers for this purpose, but we really did this on all the brands. And actually in that way, we can actually calculate FTEs, costs, everything. But let's try to go through this. And this is one approach to do this. This is how we did it. I'm sure there can be a different way to do the same, but I think this is in some way a quite good, I don't call it maybe logic. For me, it went to be logic, but this is a way actually to try to put this into a very controlled way, but also build on the data I just showed you. So all those parameters we will talk about is actually built on those data you saw before that was not so in some way positive at that given time. So this is like a virtual brand. So they have a volume today on 120 pages. Again, it's just like a virtual, but they also have a digital post. So meaning, so here we in some way merge a little bit the digital post with the pages. And you say, is that okay? Yeah, it's okay for this, because this is about what we need to produce in some way, what we did produce. So in this case, we have 360 posts to do this. So then we talked about, okay, what about reducing volume? We talked about you also before in the data, and also the findings and the problems we saw was that some of our competitors actually have less volume. And why do we in some way overperform? Was that an issue? Should we try to look into that? And I think it's also important to have the right, especially on the monthly, the magazines. A lot of those magazines really, their income is built on ads, and therefore it's really important to have a good balance between the editorial content and the ads also. So we look into this. Let's say we're going to reduce the volume of those 120 pages, also digital posts and so on, to do that. So we reduce with 12%. This is just an average compared to the 12%, but that's we remove 15 pages. I know we can't print 105, but this is more like you understand the gamification of it. Again, the digital post reduced the same way. So just by taking this action, we got from 360 down to 315. So in that sense, it's less costs and resources you need to produce 315 instead of 360. And again, build back to the data I just showed you. The next thing was reuse. So if it's possible, should we then try to reuse the content on all the channels? Actually, to do that and do clever reuse, it will be possible actually to reduce more, seeing what we need to produce ourselves. The page number will still be the same, but if something is given because it's reuse. So let's try to look into this calculation for that part. So now we use by 30%. So what is like a bold around 75 is actually what we're still going to produce, but the 30 in some way, I know this is a little bit theoretical, but the 30 is still something given to us because we already have produced it because it's reuse. So we got from 75 and reduced, from 105 down to 75 by reducing with 30 because those 30%, 30%, yeah, was 30 pages in some way. So I think we can do the same on digital because we already saw the numbers before. We actually produced too much digital. People didn't actually read so much of it, and you saw the traffic also comparing to the amount of content and posts. So let's do that the same on the 210. So we actually again get 60 posts on digital from the concept of reusing that because we already have them. And back in what is actually highlighted or bold around here is the 150 is still like new post we have to do from the start. But now we actually went from 360 down to 225 on this virtual brand we're just playing with right now. So it's quite a lot of like achievement if you're looking into that. And I know there's a lot of things here thinking about what about the editorial quality and all this. Sure, that also is in mind here, but this is just to understand this is how we actually did do this. And then we talk about increased omni, meaning that the content, let's say the story centric or the article centric, that we start with the article and actually don't care if they start on digital or they start on print or however. So we try to jump into that also. So if you go on print, we have highlight like 10 here. The first one, we still need to have a front page. We also have to have in some way set up an appendix or whatever that is there. There's some standard pages we can't remove, and we should look into that. But it's still, we also said, okay, we have the 30% reuse or 30 reuse from before, but we have 65 of those back here. The T is still, the 10 is still like need to be there. But the 65 in some way think omnichannel. Could we use that for digital also? So it's more like we use it on the different channels. So we did that calculation also and said, okay, we should just do it one-to-one, meaning that one article on print will also support one article on digital. In the real life, we actually have that one story or one article could be 2-to-1 or 1-to-4 or whatever. So that was also like a deeper gamification of that part. But just for the understanding here, we do it 1-to-1. So we did that, and in that way, we then have the 65 is actually reduced. We still have the 30 from before, and so on the reuse. I mean, looking into this, actually give that if this virtual version of a magazine and a brand size, whatever there are comparing to the posts, we went from 360 posts down to 130. And this is, again, I just said this is a virtual gamification of a no name magazine or website, but it's more to understand within the brand. That's what we did on all those brands. And that was quite exciting period. I don't say it was really interesting to see how the different brands actually came out, what was actually possible. And sure, when you actually have journalists and editors talking about reducing article or pages, it's not very easy, but everyone really went into this with like open mind, open eyes, and really jump into this. And I just want to say that this is actually how we did, and that's actually today how we produce after this, let's say, recalculation of needed pages and posts. We sure have changed some of it on the actual brands now, but this was still the baseline to do this calculation on all the brands. And they actually give one thing was like organization-wise, really give a deep dive for all people involved in the production, get a much better understanding of their own processes, of their own way of working. So I think one thing I will come back to that we actually did some gain some benefits of doing this. But I think one of the biggest benefits right now is actually our organization. I will talk about that a little bit later. But the organization was actually changed so much, so people today actually thinking like this. They're really on the editorial part and the publishing part, they are really always thinking about reuse, can we do something? So the mindset of optimization and leaning the way of working is now something really on the backbone and the rucksack of people, and that we didn't have before. So it's really was really powerful, this part of the process. So we can see the efficiency keys doing this was really that, again, fewer printed pages, fewer digital posts, increased reuse co-production, increase Omni, purchase costs, and numbers FTE. So sure, in this calculation, the resources and cost of everything was like a lot of potential there, and we also executed on that. But let's go to the next part. So some of you, if you heard Capero's last months, this is just like I want to go into the most important stuff for this before we have, like, also as I mentioned in the start, very siloed setup, meaning that we have like a brand with a chief editor, with supporting chief editor, and all those like normally historically way of working with a magazine within Ella. I'm sure some of you have had the same setup. Maybe some of you have the same setup today. But what we really changed here was we actually introduced something called chief of the cluster, or like so we actually suddenly we put one person was actually like chief editor for multiple brands and site for that matter also. So we actually did that, and we actually put in, so you can see this small human people you see here. The most important learning was here that we actually, as you saw for the content remix earlier in this slide deck, is that we actually created those editorial hubs within the different categories. And just to understand this, if you take brand 1 here, there's only on this brand 1, there's actually only 3 employees working. All the other that's more dimmed or grayed is actually content types that are actually supported for other editorial hubs. And that's how we then saw it. So the editorial hubs is actually now very much the engine of what we do on the content side. Now, sure, will be some localization in a given brand because of the DNA of a given brand. There could be some very local stuff they have to write, but in some way the brands was really built on the building blocks of those different categories. So what we did here was really that we looked into this, and we really got the benefit of having those editorial hubs. And as you see here, we have like brand 1 and brand 2. So we actually have like one that have the mandate for all those brands. And I would say brand 1 and 2. They could be brand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If after which, let's say a cluster. So we have a cluster for trends. We have a cluster, and the trend cluster is also youth and the young ones, and also actually all our fashion statements and so on. So it's really important that we also have the food and so on, lifestyle universe. So it's a different universe with one chief editor, management chief editor, with multiple brands on it. So the brands is still there, but the content is created in a much broader perspective within the editorial hubs. So what was very important here, the fundamentals were really changing here. I'll try to go through them and try to explain what was the importance here. One thing, as just mentioned before, that all editors work omnichannel. That was like one of the things we need to do in this new setup. External editors, and external in this case is the gray ones, meaning they, from the brand, they are external because they are sitting in another brand / editorial hub, have the operational mandate for content and publish directly on all channels and brands. Meaning, if you have a brand 1, the people if you take the dummy or the layout of the actual magazine, let's say there are 4 spreads of food every week in that magazine. The mandate of which food that should go in there in that brand number 1 is not controlled by the editor chief or editorial manager on brand 1. No, that is controlled by actually the people that have the responsibility and the know-how and are specialists within the food editorial hub. So we actually changed the mandate here and moved that around. That have been very efficiency, but also closed a little bit down that everyone is in Ally try to work together for the given channel, and the people that are specialists that will have the power to do things is really centric around creating the content for all channels. So editorial managers have a content responsibility for title, brand, universe, and have a strategic mandate for all content that they own the omni planning and all the quality for external editors. So what we also did, because we can talk about the quality assurance in some way, we have the right quality, and we do that in the sense that I think it's every quarter or something like that, the owner of the brand or the editor of that cluster have like an alignment process with the given category manager on the given editorial hub. So they in some way align if that should the expression be a little bit different, should the colors be different, but it's not nothing we do on every issue we produce. This is something we keep on doing every quarterly to make sure that we have the right voice and tone and DNA and all this stuff. Again, editors have a strategic business role and point to contact. So the top editor here, because that was really also the bigger change, that now the editor-in-chief for the given cluster also really connecting very much to the marketing and the B2B part also, because we are working together to get the best possible out of those brands within that given cluster. So that's very important. So they're much more into the financial also now. So looking at what is really working for us as let's say a cluster, what can we do with that brand and so on. But there's very much closer collaboration now between all the disciplines within Ally to actually produce and earn money. Again, operational work should work without the editor-in-chief, meaning that the editorial manager sitting down there, the editor-in-chief have no hands on whatever in the production. Very important here. They're more strategic. All reuse is planned. Instead of reusing on demand, saying, oh, we need this, we actually have now, let's say, a way of planning the whole editorial agenda, what we're going to do. So we know months before what we're actually going to have in the magazine, and that way is planned. And that way we also can do one-to-many. So we have a story-centric area or story we want to talk about. We can make different version of that to the different channels, different brands. So that is done prior to the actual production in very good time. And that's very important for the actually controlled and much better reuse. It's actually not so much reuse anymore, it's more planning. And that's very important also moving that way. Titles that have difficulty with reuse in a DK, meaning that we don't have the content ourselves. Let's go to our good friends within the in Ally Nordic. Could we reuse some of those because they also have editorial hubs for some of the same areas? And I'm sure you think, okay, will that be next step? It could be, but the most important thing is that we still reuse on a Nordic level. And again, clear productivity and reuse per cluster and titles. Everyone in a given brand, whatever, know exactly what they're going to produce, not less, not more. That's how to do. And again, a joint planning structure across titles and clusters. That was very important. So that's like very short. I couldn't have a whole presentation about the whole organization because that's but I hope you understand that we did a little bit what the newspapers did. They have editorial hubs. We now introduce that in a very broad perspective in different categories. And that way we really got the power of reusing and producing where specialists do really good content. One of the benefits of our editorial hubs is that we also use that to our content marketing agency we also own, because they have clients that are using food. So now we specialize to producing food. So now it's also going out in that area. So that's like a benefit on top of this. So this is also WoodWing. So I will try to explain a bit about what we actually do today, which platforms we have, and what is also how the future looks like. But just to understand what we actually did, because one thing is to do all this you just heard. We should also have to have some tech stack or technology that's supporting that, like omnichannel publishing, for example, and stuff like that. So just to have to understanding that we are around 1,000 journalists, freelancers, and photographers using in the WoodWing platform. Publish to web, print, apps, social media, reuse from other countries between platforms, meaning that we have plus 150 brands to take all the small brands also. Just have the understanding also, we also have outsourcing on layout part quite a lot. We have around 50% outsource in 3 different locations. We have in Dubai, we have Riga, Latvia, but also Ho Chi Minh city in Vietnam. So 50% of that, and I have to say again, all this is only possible because we have 100% hosted AWS WoodWing platform. So the whole production is in the cloud. So if you're sitting home, now we have Corona. We have no one in the house. I'm sitting here now because I made sure you have the bandwidth to talk to you. But editorial, sitting at home and everything, we have not had one envy breakdown. We have not missed one title, everything running. And I think when we choose in 2015, in the project, I did run that project also to get WoodWing out in the Nordics, to actually get that in and actually running and actually working, and the performance is really good. That was also a milestone we need to have. If you didn't have this centralized platform, all that I just talked to you around of the whole organization, how to optimize, will have not been possible. So this is also here, this is a build on a given platform. We have the technology supporting the new way of working. That is very important. Just to see the starting point here, we have WoodWing editorial platform. We have what do you call it, Contestation, I think it's called Aurora, I think it's Contestation 11. I'm not so much into the details anymore around that, but again, we have those static. We also have story photos and content. Before brand-centric science work for my brand, that is in some way sure changed. And we also have channel-centric, meaning that, again, I do print and digital, just we talked about before, so we have to change that also within this platform. And we actually also, the old days, and the old days is back in before April, I think, last year, we still have like copy-paste through from like, from something maybe in the WoodWing Classic, we have the Contestation Classic that given time and actually just put it in. So that was really our old way of working, but now we actually design some new process, a new way of seeing the worlds. Then we have to be sure that we also have a system supporting that. So we did that. And I think one of the last slides I have here is actually just to understand that we write to all channels, like we have story-centric, really important, but also because the whole reuse idea of, because as you media neutral, some is like the basic format, I think, in Aurora today or in Contestation 11, but we also have legacy content. And we did have to make sure that we can actually, one thing is by write to all channels, publish to all channels, but also reactivate old content within this new scenario. So we did some integration here to do that, so we can actually right click on old stuff in Elvis and push it in this new workflow. No copy paste, one workflow for all channels. And again, all artists create either media neutral or we use the legacy content from the start. So this is a little bit also, I think WoodWing also have the different tracks, how this do, but this is how we actually did that. And we also have apps today, so we also in some way push that sense also out as a channel. So this was very much, I could not use that 1 hour too, just on the organization part, but I think we have 5-6 minutes less here. So I think it's time to question.
Yeah, great, thanks Lars. And yeah, so there's also potentially some customers not yet using our product. So when Lars talks about Elvis, he talks about the name, or at least the former name of our digital asset management system. We call that nowadays WoodWing Assets, but it's great that that name stick quite well with those people who've been using it. So Lars, I have 1 or 2 questions, but there's also a question from the audience, from Ger. So were there any or many reactions from customers about that have potentially seen content coming back in another magazine or weekly when you started increasing your reuse?
We have the same concern when we did this. Also on the editorial part, right? Because if you have the but the good thing, we don't have any like cross magazine cannibalization between different, like the buyers of the users actually that we reuse normally was not like someone have the same magazines. So on the figures, we can't see any like let's say negative backfire of doing this. So the answer is in some way no. Yeah.
And the project end to end, how long did it take? Because it sounds like quite a long project, right? And some extensive project.
One important thing I can say here, that's what we call a quite speedy project. We started in April last year, and the whole reorganization, how it should look like, was ended in September. So this is around 6 months to do all the calculation, to involve those people involved to create the new scenario. One thing must vary here, and this is just like I have an approach called done beats perfect. And I think what we did here was that actually let's say the implementation of this new way of working was actually done after end of September. So we actually implemented why we changed the things like formally. So as you can see, we reduced some staffing, we did some of that, so we are less people producing within this new content setup. So that was a quite interesting time, but it actually worked because everyone was really, because there was the people that have the power, the mandate was actually in the process, so they also jump into the actual implementation. So I think we did the implementation from 6 months to actually create the whole new scenario, how to work, and we used 2 to 3 months actually to implement this. So 9 months in totally. I can see one thing on the digital effort here that we also in April this year, you understand that the COVID was in there, so there was some training on the digital like multi-channel thing on WoodWing was a little bit postponed, but we fixed that in a later online session, so now that is now working. So, but yeah, between 6 and 9 months, 9 months in total with the implementation. So that's, but yeah.
And in terms of what's next, Lars, are you done, or is you looking at more Nordic reuse to further optimize, or other things, cooperation between countries, which might be also challenging, but also offering up possibilities?
We can see a little bit like the logic next step is that we should reuse better on a Nordic level, but sometimes it's still difficult because we have to remember sometimes the countries, I know it's the Scandinavia, but still the DNA of the content is sometimes very much different compared to Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden. So, but sure, we also reuse very much in Nordic today, and we use your DAM solution to do that already. So we do that. There's a lot of countries actually reuse a lot of Danish stuff, but that's another thing. But I think the good thing of the whole process here, because we are now looking into new digital offers. We are working on a quite huge project. Hopefully we're going to launch that in April next year. And all this is only possible because everything is centric around the content, because we are a publicist house. We need to have the content centric approach for whatever we do. And this is really now we have the baseline, the technology and everything to do this. And that's actually, if we did not do this, we have just shown you, we don't have the power to actually do what we're going to do next.
All right, so Lars, we're going to wrap it up. So thanks. I know you're and it is a very interesting project, and I know that there is more even to it than what you could share now, but I really appreciate this. Thanks for everyone for dialing in. I hope this webinar gave you some inspiration for 2021. From our side, we're just a small piece in the puzzle of such a big project, but together with our partners, we are really keen to help you to also look at a content first way of working. I really think that I hope that it's inspired you, that it can give you a lot of benefits. And if you do this in such a way, and yeah, from our side, we can help with having the tools in place, because obviously that's needed, and Lars touched on that. But it's a lot about the larger transformation. And I also got a final comment from the audience. Great insights. Thank you very much, and keep going, Lars. So that's that you get back. And with that, wishing everyone good holidays, and talk to you again in the new year. Thanks, Lars, and
thank you very
thanks
much.
everyone. Have a
Nice
good day.
holiday. Bye.